He has spent almost 30 years in jail that experts all over the world say he just didn't commit. Claude Garrett was convicted of killing his girlfriend by arson. But the problem is, if there's no arson, there's no murder. February 1992, Claude Garrett and his fiancée Lori Lance come back from the bars after a night of drinking. Garrett says they watch a little TV, smoke some cigarettes on the couch, and then head to bed. Garrett says they wake up to fire and smoke. Garrett gets out the front door. Lance dies in the laundry room. Investigators claim Garrett started a fire with kerosene in the living room and locked Lance in the laundry room. He is charged and convicted of murder. But here's the thing we now know. The laundry room door was open. Crime scene pictures prove it. And after studying evidence, every single independent arson investigator since that original investigation have all come up with the same conclusion. This was not arson. Stuart Bain was the first, but far from the last.
People who are independent of this case and look at this thoroughly, they've all come to the same conclusion, and that is he could not have done this. And, I hate to be a broken record, but very much like to be a broken record until this is resolved.
Bain was asked to review the case 18 years ago. He feels so strongly about it, the arson expert has worked pro bono for Claude Garrett for 18 years. Since then, a who's who of arson experts have looked at the case. John DeHaan might be the leading expert in the world on what happens to people's bodies when they're burned in fires. He says the problems begin with the original idea that Garrett set the fire. Lori Lance was barefoot and would have had to run through the living room to get to the laundry room.
Pour kerosene on the floor, you're going to have a pool fire at floor level with flames a few inches high. And if you're walking through it, you're going to have some sort of damage.
Lance had no burn marks on her feet. Absolutely impossible with the prosecution's theory. There's more. Lance and Garrett had nearly identical burns, suggesting they were both burned exactly the same way in exactly the same place. We could go on with so much technical information it would be numbing and too much for this story, but what you need to know is other than the original Davidson County detective and ATF fire investigator, not one expert in the world who has looked at this fire says it's arson.
But if you have people who have been, on both sides of the issue, and universally they all say, no, that call of that being arson was wrong, you really have to, that's an incredible score at that point.
Claude Garrett has maintained his innocence all along.
The last 4 or 5 years has been really difficult.
So has his daughter, Dina Watson.
Not so much.
But Watson says don't listen to her. You don't have to. Listen to the 11 experts who have no connection to Claude Garrett.
But the hard part now is, you've got so many people who are saying this is not possible, and the door's still closed. It's that struggle with that's not justice, right? If people are saying there's no scientific way that is possible, the way that we run it today, the part that I struggle with is then why in the world are we still here?
That's the question. That's why the Innocence Project took the case. They call it a conviction based on junk science. That's why the DA's office put it in the hands of its conviction review unit that reinvestigates possible wrongful convictions. By law, the DA's office can't comment on the review process, but every indication appears it is near complete. Has Claude Garrett spent 29 years in jail as an innocent man? He can't even let himself think of that.
I have hope, and like I said, I've always had faith that the truth would come out. And when an unbiased entity takes a look at something like this, it's encouraging, hopeful. All I can do now is just wait and see what they do.
We are expecting big news on this story very soon, and we are going to stay on top of it. We will have that for you the moment it happens. I'm Dennis Ferrier, Fox 17 News, your Code Red station. This was never a case where opinion was divided on whether this was arson or not. You have the original investigation, which called it arson, and now you have everyone else. 14 of the leading fire scientists in the world saying it's not arson.
This is a post-conviction hearing based on new scientific evidence.
It's the strangest sight you will ever see. The Innocence Project defense team and the prosecution both arguing to let a man out of prison. But that's exactly what happened in Nashville today, where some of the nation's leading fire scientists testified there is absolutely no proof that the fire that killed Garrett's live-in girlfriend, Lori Lance, was arson.
There is new scientific evidence, unheard by a jury, that dismantles all evidence of Mr. Garrett's guilt in this case. That if the state had been armed with the information that we now have, both about the investigation and the scientific developments, we would not have indicted this case.
Family members of Miss Lance say they want the conviction to stand. They believe the jury made the right decision and suggest this effort to overturn the case is political.
So I feel that there's been a lot of bias in favor of Mr. Garrett from our district attorney.
But 14 of the top fire scientists in the world say the determination of arson was based on junk science, poor investigation, and inaccuracies.
All of these things have since been debunked, and it really takes fire investigators through. They have got to keep up their education and training.
Judge Monty Watkins is reviewing the case. He heard a lot today. It's big, it's technical. He did say he would make a decision as soon as possible. I'm Dennis Ferrier, Fox 17 News, your Code Red station. Convicted murderers don't just walk out of Riverbend maximum security prison. What made today so unusual is that Claude Garrett is no longer convicted of anything. And who would hold an innocent man in jail for even one more day who has suffered for 30 years? 30 years of hearings and appeals and trials and retrials all ended today in 10 minutes.
And Garrett's conviction in this case is vacated and rendered void.
Judge Monty Watkins said it's obvious to anyone there's no proof Claude Garrett set that fire that killed his fiancée Lori Lance and burned him back in 1992. And if there is no arson, there is no murder. And so like that, he was released to a strange new world, a world where he doesn't own a change of clothes.
He's been in prison for 30 years, and what he wore there, he probably doesn't want to put back on.
His daughter's trying to get him ready for what's coming.
Doesn't know how to use a cell phone.
Garrett has champions all over the world, a who's who of fire investigators, the Innocence Project, and even finally the Nashville District Attorney's Office all asked for the conviction to be vacated. All very important, but no one like Stuart Bain. The fire PI from Tennessee has used every opportunity ever offered to talk about Garrett's innocence for the past 21 years. Finally, that's no longer necessary.
It's a long time coming. It's due. There's words that fail me at a moment like this. I'm looking for the right phrase.
Maybe it isn't about words anymore. It's finally about relief. And when Claude Garrett walked out of Riverbend with a trash can full of appeals paperwork, it was Bain who met him first.
Welcome to the free world, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate the free world. Thank you.
You earned it.
When Garrett went to prison, his daughter Dina was 4.5 years old. Now his daughter has a 4.5-year-old son. What happened in between those 4.5-year-olds is too tragic to dwell on. But clearly, it's the one thing that matters most.
Her, my daughter, my grandson.
And then it was time to go. As a free man, you can do that with your arm around your daughter. Garrett is in extraordinary physical shape, 200 push-ups a day, 2-mile runs. Why? Because he's 64 and he needs to go to work immediately and for as long as he can. I'm Dennis Ferrier, Fox 17 News, your Code Red station. Thank you. We helped Joseph Webster get out of prison for a murder he didn't commit. We interviewed witnesses and worked closely with his bulldog lawyer, Daniel Horwitz. Webster got out of prison Thanksgiving 2020. After that, we started getting stacks and stacks of prison mail, all with a common theme. I'm innocent. I didn't do it. I need your help. So we started reading, looking for the perfect case. Right before Christmas, a phone call from Private Detective Patrick Riley asking me to at least listen to Fire Private Investigator Stuart Bain. We met Bain in his Oliver Springs home in East Tennessee with his huge file containing 2 decades of material to free Claude Garrett. The Innocence Project had taken the case. That's a big deal because they only take 1% of the cases they're pitched. Even better, Davidson County's Conviction Review Unit was looking at the case. This is the special unit under Sonny Eaton that had decided to vacate the conviction against Joseph Webster. This case had everything. Huge investigative mistakes.
How many mistakes were there in the original investigation?
I think they're still being found. There are so many flagrant misapplications of the scientific method.
It was reported Garrett's fiancée, Lori Lance, died locked in their Nashville laundry room. It wasn't locked. If Garrett started the fire to kill his fiancée, why did they have nearly identical burns, which backed Garrett's story of the two waking up in a bed to fire? The fire investigator at the time said it was a kerosene fire poured in the living room. Experts say it wasn't true. Absolutely no proof of that.
Let's talk about the alleged murder weapon for a moment, kerosene. The prosecution maintains Claude Garrett poured kerosene all over the living room floor and then lit it. The problem is, kerosene is not gasoline. The fire experts will tell you kerosene ignites when the vapors reach 110 degrees. It was 50 degrees that night, no central heating. So what would happen if you put a match to kerosene?
As we continue to report, more and more experts come forward. Garrett risked punishment to talk to us on the phone from Riverbend, risked his impeccable 30-year prison record.
The state has you clothed in a tailor-made suit of guilt, and you have to start pulling on the threads. And if you keep pulling on the threads and never quit, eventually that suit will fall off of you.
By the time of our 7th report, 14 of the world's top experts said there's no evidence this was arson. And of course, no arson, no murder.
Welcome to the free world, man.
Thank you, brother.
So many people had so much to do with the release of Claude Garrett. It is an honor to have even a small role in such a big moment.
Mr. Ferrier, I appreciate you very much, and Fox 17, what you've done.
Sometimes it's about getting someone out of jail. Sometimes it's about putting someone in jail for an unsolved murder. Either way, it feels meaningful. I'm Dennis Ferrier, Fox 17 News, your Code Red station.